Hey everyone, this is another awesome episode of Poetry Worldwide. And once again, we are keeping our commitment to giving you the hottest interviews with the coolest poets. And this one is another one for the record books here. But before we get started, we just want to say thank you to WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network for believing in the goal and the dream that poets are out here and we definitely deserve to be heard. And we also want to say another big thank you to treasuredmemoriesgraphics.com for hooking us up with this awesome logo. So please visit treasuredmemoriesgraphics.com to get all of your marketing and branding needs together. We also want to let you know that we are a Gospel Image Award nominated show, so you are dealing with the Real Deal Poetry Show here. So we just wanted to say thank you and definitely continue watching. So I've happened upon this poet with one of my organizations, the Spartan City Poetry Club, and she definitely has a different way of looking things, a very insightful, very mindful way of writing poetry. And you all are going to get just a sample of who she is as a writer today. So I want to introduce you to the Kathy Riegel. I'm sorry, Katie, Katie Riegel. I'm sorry. I was trying to rename you there with a new pen name, but Katie Riegel. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine and looking forward to talking to everybody.
All right. Well, Katie, there's one thing that we always ask, no matter who is on the show. So I'm particularly interested in this. When did you start writing? When did it kind of click for you?
You know, I actually started writing when I was really little kid. I was very, very lucky. I grew up in a house where we had poetry books on the bookshelf. We had Robert Frost and Sarah Teasdale and Rudyard Kipling, and not just the Jungle Books, but his poetry as well. And I just, I was so lucky. I felt that chill you get when you hear a really great poem. And I was encouraged to go ahead and start writing my own poems. So I know I started writing as early as 8 or 9 and just never stopped. There was a period when I was a teenager where I wrote songs. And then I got to college and realized I wasn't a particularly good musician, but I did love writing the words. And then I got into some poetry classes and I've been writing ever since then.
That's great. What things seem to inspire you when you write poetry, or what kind of subjects do you find yourself really gravitating towards?
I think, all poetry is ultimately about the human condition. It's about trying to figure out what we mean in this world, what our lives mean, and how they matter. I think in terms of the images you see in my poems, it's going to be a lot of birds and nature and that sort of thing. Because I am a country girl at heart. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Illinois. But when it comes to subject matter, it's really about, how do we deal with our sadness and our worries and our joys?
Definitely. That's good. I know that you definitely have a poem for us today, so I definitely can't wait to get into that. So, um, the next question I was interested in is, why do you write poetry? So what's your motivation for doing that?
I think we're all trying to make sense of our lives. We're all trying to figure out, as I said, sort of what it all means. And different people have different ways of doing that. There are people who make sense through writing music, and there are people who make sense through doing visual art. And for me, it's about words. You have to try to figure out how to put something really complex, almost impossible to describe, down into words, something difficult to say, and put it down on the page. And so I go to poetry for that experience, to try to get my more difficult and mysterious thoughts down on the page so that I can understand things better.
Definitely. I heard it's one of my favorite movies, but It was about this guy. He had no experience, writing at all, and he was telling one of his friends. He said, "You don't know how hard this stuff is, taking what's in your head and putting it down on paper, and it's like trying to put a puzzle together."
That's
And yeah, definitely. And I could hear bits and pieces of that scene within that movie,
mhm.
about when you were saying, you're trying to make sense of it all. You're trying to get that mysterious kind of unexplained part of life, down on paper. So that's definitely good. Do you find that a therapeutic experience? What do you kind of get out of that?
I think mostly the experience itself for me is very much like meditation, actually. The sense of being in the zone where you're not concentrating on anything else but the writing itself. So the actual time spent writing is so almost sacred, I would say.
Mhm.
And then after the fact, there's the satisfaction of at least getting a part of what you think down on the page in a way that somebody else might be able to understand it.
Definitely, definitely. So, I mean, with that, you've definitely touched upon the human condition and really using it to, figure things out. Why do you think poetry is important in the world today? Why should we have it and definitely preserve it and keep it around?
Well, I think poetry does amazing things with addressing the big questions that we all have. What does it mean to be human? Do other people feel the same way I feel? Why are we here? And so much of our culture is the culture of distraction, right? I understand it, we all need to escape sometimes, we all need to get some relaxation, but it's a culture of distraction, of the pinging of your email and your cell phone. And poetry brings us back to these important questions that I think we don't talk about enough. Um, there's a poem that I go back to over and over that deals with one of my big questions myself that I have, which is how do we deal with all the suffering there is in the world? Not necessarily our own personal suffering, but the suffering that other people experience and that we know about. And this poem is called A Brief for the Defense by Jack Gilbert. And he says, if we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of others' suffering. We must risk delight. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world.
Mm,
And I figure if poetry can say something about that issue, it's something we all need to come back to.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, I I I really truly believe that everybody, no matter what language they speak, everybody should at least have a favorite poem. I mean, one poem, like you said, you always go back to that one. I go to Robert Frost and I have miles to go before I sleep. Sometimes it feels like that, and it's just so much. Yeah, definitely, just so much stuff to be done. Before you can just kind of put it all away. But I agree with you that we do have this culture of distraction. You have your phone, or the millennia of multitasking. So it's just, we're not concentrated on that one thing. And poetry really does bring you to that one focused task. So definitely some great responses here, guys. If you're just tuning in, we are talking to Katie Riegel. She is definitely a great poet here. She's been giving us some good theories, some good things to really, I would say, philosophically chew on. So we're definitely having a good conversation here. So we've talked so much about how you write, why you write, and some of your theories of why we should keep poetry in the forefront. Do you have any poems that you've written yourself that you'd like to read and share with the audience today?
Sure, I have one. Um, this is one that was published in an online magazine called Kettle Blue Review. And I love those online magazines because everybody can access them. It's free
Yeah.
to look at them. It's called What the Dead Think. Hope will come welling up like blood from a cut, whether you're ready with a tissue or not. The shame you've been carrying like a stone in your shoe for so long, for years, will be dislodged. How do you know, you say? My mother died still crying for her parents to love her. You don't know everything, least of all what the dead think. See that smudge on the horizon, a cloud of wind and dirt? Someone is coming to bring you precisely what you need. So,
Wow. I'm not gonna lie, Katie. I was kind of on the edge of my seat. I was like, this poem can't be done, but I was engrossed in it. But wow, everyone, please, if you just tuned in again, hit that back button. Like I always tell you, um, we just heard a great poem by Katie Riegel, "What the Dead Think." I mean, I know I guess I was like, man, is there like a part two? I really enjoyed that. Man, that was a
oh,
great
thank you.
poem.
That's very
Awesome. So, I mean, you've definitely, I mean, over and above, you've definitely displayed your talent of, I always say the best poets can say the most in the shortest span of time. And I mean, you really did say a lot. So, I know that we have young poets, budding artists, you know, no matter what their age, you know, people are coming out in different ways and writing. What advice would you give to that young poet or that writer just starting out?
You know, I'm so excited by how many people are writing poetry today. I've seen it happening, like you said, all ages. People are admitting to have been writing poetry for years and really coming out of the woodwork. It's wonderful. You know, my best advice really to poets is to embrace your inner weird, which
Right.
is to write what only you can write, to
Mhm.
recognize that your own experience matters so much because your life is totally unique. Readers, they don't want you to say the same old thing in the same old way. They want to be surprised by your language. They want to be transported to your point of view. And I really think, you know, those details that you think maybe won't be universal are in fact the very thing that are going to make your reader love you. The actual name of the street you grew up on has its own layers of meaning for the reader too. And things like the songs you sing to yourself while you're doing laundry, the weird little quirky things that we all do, that's what we want to see in a poem. And so you need to kind of trust yourself, trust your reader to truly be interested in that inner person that you are, that really interesting and quirky and weird person that you are, and get that on the page.
Definitely. It sounds like there needs to be some self-acceptance before you even step to the paper, that, you know, people do want to hear what I have to say. What I have to say matters. You know, the fact that I wore a zebra suit to school or something crazy like that is going to
Exactly.
matter to somebody. So I think that is
Exactly.
beautiful. That is some good stuff. So you got some really sage advice, and that's one thing that we always want to tell people on the show is definitely, as Katie said, accept that inner weird, accept that quirk, that idiosyncrasy that makes you genuinely you, because we, especially nowadays, we need to see that. So we need to see that realness with everything going on. We need to see that transparency. So that is good. And now, uh, there was a question that came up, especially you were talking about meditation, and I've definitely been in that, and that's helped to really kind of clear up some cobwebs for me. But as far as, I would say, gelling the meditation within your art, how do you think meditation and mindfulness can help us as poets?
Well, you know, I want to say that for a lot of people, the word meditation might be a little off putting because they think it's, you know, really strange. For some people, like my sister, she just calls it prayer, but it's the same thing. It's this focusing on not all these external things, but on the present moment. And maybe you're focusing on something spiritual, and that's beautiful and wonderful too. It's a way of getting some of that noise of the world outside of your head. And if you're not if you're not religious, then maybe your focus is just going to be on this sort of inner peace. You're going to be thinking about, you're going to be noticing your thoughts and feelings. I think one misconception about meditation is you can sit down and clear your mind entirely. And no one can do that, no one at all can do that. But you notice, maybe you're going to have a thought or feeling, and you'll say to yourself, oh, I notice I'm thinking about that meeting that I have tomorrow. Okay, I'm noticing it, and then I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it float down this river, and I'm going to bring my thinking back to the breath, for example, the breathing in and out. Just that sense of being in your body in the current moment. And I think it connects to poetry in that we need practice excluding all those voices that are clamoring for our attention in this world. The voices of the TV and our email and our snail mail, if anybody still gets that. But all those voices, those things that want our attention, we need practice figuring out when and how to exclude them, to keep them out of the creative, really central part of who we are. Personally, I believe we're all spiritual beings in some way or another, and that meditation and creation, whether it's poetry or some other art form, is a chance of connecting with that inner spirit. And so, I think meditation is just beautiful, wonderful practice for what you need to do when you're sitting down to write a poem, which is to get all that clamor out of your head and really focus on what's important to you.
Definitely. And it's almost like if an artist or a person, an artist more in our case here, if you do take that time to meditate, to have that mindfulness, it's almost like sifting for gold. It's almost like you put it down in the water and then you bring it back up, and whatever you sift is kind of, your feelings will kind of rise, will be that cream that kind of rises to the top. And you could just realize, okay, I'm not feeling happy in this particular moment. Why is that? And then you can begin to, start putting those metaphors and those similes together, or you could write a happy poem or something like that, or just really get a good gauge on what you're feeling. So I definitely understand that, and I think that's something I'm going to put in my own poetry toolkit, to get the most out of the poems. And definitely when I heard your poem, I could sense that. I said, you have a good grip on what you're reading. And that caused me, to kind of, have you ever read and then you see the audience kind of lean in,
Oh,
just
yeah.
really giving you that inclination, like, yeah, I'm feeling what you're saying. So with all of this going on, my next question, I really want to know, what are you working on now?
I actually have three things that I'm working on, really. One is I have a completed poetry manuscript that it's a book manuscript that I've got sent out to several small presses, and I'm just sitting around keeping my fingers crossed that one of them wants to take it and publish it. It's a very competitive thing getting a book published these days. I have a couple of books published, but this is the new one, and so it's out there, and the poem I read is part of that manuscript. There's a wonderful, like I said, so many people writing today that it's fairly competitive. There are really good books out there that the presses have their pick to publish. So that's one thing. And I wanted to say that anybody who's interested in the publishing side of things, they might take a look at Poets and Writers. They have really good resources online.
Yes.
Or newpages.com. That's another really good set of resources for magazines, especially if you want to get your work out there. Second, I'm working on writing poems for a new collection. I'm sort of always writing. I think, even when you think, oh, I'm not writing much, you'll look back over the past week and realize, well, you did jot down a few lines on an envelope while you were waiting on the phone for, on hold or something. And so this new collection is mostly they're coming out as poems about my childhood in the country, and they're turning out to be fairly much like memoirs. So who knows, it may be a very much like a nonfiction kind of a collection of poetry. And then the third thing and most exciting right now is I'm working on a joint project with a writer friend of mine named Lisa Rose. We're putting together a writing community, a collection of resources and classes for writers. It's called Rightful Inc. And that's what the website will be, rightful.inc. And by fall, probably by October or November of this year, we'll have the website up and going. Our hope is to guide writers through the difficulties of the writing life. That is doubt and rejection and getting too busy and all those things that keep us from writing. We want to help provide specific goals and ways for writers to keep writing, to be happy writers. We're all about encouraging other writers. So, that's something that's really exciting. What is going to be the most useful to other writers that we can put together?
Definitely.
So,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Take a breath. Yeah. I mean, you definitely got a lot going on, but I mean, a lot of good stuff on three levels. So you got projects out there, you're working on another project, and then you're having a collaborative effort. So I think you kind of got three layers of a really good poetic cake there. And now publishers, we always talk directly to people on this show. Now publishers, Katie Riegel is out here. So, hey,
that's right.
I mean, we got Simon and Schuster, we got Random House. I mean, hey, you got someone right here. We're hand delivering them to you right now. No need to look any further. So, what my hope is, and with all honesty, by the time this airs, we hope that you can make this interview as a part of your getting to know your author book tour, whatever you want to name it. So that's definitely my
That
hope.
would be wonderful.
My hope for you. Yeah, definitely. We always want to make sure that the poets are first and foremost here. And now our interview is drawing to a close. So I do want people to know, how can they get in contact with you? How can they connect with you and also connect with your organization that's coming up soon?
Okay, so my website is just katherineriegel.com. It's very straightforward, no caps, no spaces, just Katherine, Katherine, Riegel, Riegel.com. You can find me on Facebook too. I pretty much friend anybody who asks me to, because I love to have a big community of writers and readers. And our website is rightful, WRITEFUL.inc, INK, which is really cool because now you can have more than just .com or .org on the end of your things. So
Yeah.
very
Well,
exciting.
that is good. Well, listeners, viewers, you have a lot of homework, a lot of good homework. So let's not have the bad connotation of homework, but you all have a lot of things to get into. You can get into Katie and understand what she's doing, and hopefully find yourself. So sometimes you can look at another poet, study their work, and then you can begin to find your own voice. So, I mean, you got a wonderful example here. So, Katie, thank you so much again for being on the show. I need to go and write something now, but I got to close this show out. So we're definitely, at least here, I guess I can't help but say it, but we're definitely praying for you, sending good vibes your way. And then we want to see the next time, possibly on an update show, or hopefully you'll be too busy to do an update show because you're already be published and you'll be doing your thing.
I
But
love what you guys do. I would love to talk to you all again.
all right, well, that is good. Well, you heard it here first. But everyone, once again, we were speaking with the Katie Riegel, and we just thank you all for listening. So before we close out the show on our network, we always like to lead the audience. If you do not have a personal relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, we want to lead you in a prayer. Just a very simple one, nothing too ornate. You could just say, Lord Jesus, I repent of my sins. Come into my life. I make you my Lord and Savior. And with that very simple prayer, we on the show believe that you are born again and that you are ready to start your life anew. We would ask that you would get into a Bible-based church, keep the Lord first place in your life, and he will take you to places that you have never dreamed of. So once again, I'm Jessica Crenshaw. That is the Katie Riegel, guys. We actually got her on the show. So we just want to thank WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network again for giving us this wonderful platform to speak with poets out here that are doing their thing. And we also want to say Poetry Worldwide is giving poets a voice. Are you ready to be heard? Have a good one.
All right.